The Warrant Tech lobby was quiet, almost eerily so for a Thursday evening. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly as if mirroring the tension in the air. Then came the sound of frantic footsteps, small but determined. 6-year-old Leah Warren burst through the polished glass doors, her white dress torn and smudged with dirt. Behind her, the nanny stumbled, phone pressed to her ear, trying desperately to reach someone, anyone, who could help. The lobby employees froze, unsure whether to intervene, unsure of what to make of the scene unfolding before them. But Leah had only one person in mind. She ran past the security guard, past the receptionists, straight to the janitor who was quietly mopping the marble floor. Mr. Daniel. His gray uniform was plain, almost invisible against the polished backdrop of corporate excess. But to Leah, he was the only one who could help. Her tiny hands gripped his uniform. "Mr. Daniel, please," she sobbed. "She needs help now." Daniel looked down at her. His weathered face betrayed nothing at first, calm and unreadable as it had been for years. But then something flickered in his eyes, an edge of recognition, a spark of focus. He set down his mop with methodical precision and asked quietly, "Show me where." For 3 years, Daniel Carter had been invisible. Every morning at 5, he arrived through the service entrance, punched his time card, and disappeared into the hallways, sweeping, mopping, emptying trash, scrubbing coffee stains. He was there, and yet nobody really saw him. Management appreciated his silence. He was reliable, invisible, perfectly forgettable. Daniel's apartment reflected his life, bare, functional, almost ascetic. A narrow bed, a small table, 2 chairs, a hot plate, and a single framed photograph face down on a scratched dresser. It hadn't been looked at in 2 years. Most evenings, he volunteered at a community clinic in the poorest parts of the city, teaching basic first aid to anyone willing to learn. Street kids, elderly people with no one else. They were his students, his small acts of purpose. And none of them knew he had once been a doctor, a trauma surgeon, a man who had saved countless lives in war zones. That was a life he had walked away from, leaving behind medals, accolades, and the weight of unbearable loss. Cecilia Warren, in stark contrast, was everything Daniel was not. At 34, she had inherited Warren Tech after her father's sudden death. She transformed the struggling software company into a thriving enterprise, commanding contracts worth millions, negotiating deals across cities, all while raising Leah as a single mother. She rarely slept, working 16-hour days without complaint, her daughter coloring quietly in the corner office. Yet something had been amiss. Numbers didn't add up. Funds were disappearing. Accounts were manipulated. And the man she trusted most, the CFO Richard Brennan, was smiling, assuring her all was fine, while the truth was a ticking time bomb. Leah's bond with Daniel had grown over these years. The little girl often snuck away from her nanny to visit him in the basement corridors. She called him Mr. Daniel, and he would look up from his mopping, shaking his head with a faint smile. He listened. She spoke about school, friends, her feelings of loneliness in a corporate world too big for a child. She confided in him the fears she dared not share with her mother. Sometimes he taught her small skills, a proper knot, how to whistle through her fingers. Employees whispered, questioning why the CEO's daughter spent time with a janitor. But Cecilia noticed the quiet, the gentleness in Daniel's presence, and never stopped her daughter. That Thursday night, everything changed. Cecilia stayed late, buried in financial documents exposing systematic embezzlement, tracing millions siphoned into shell companies, all bearing the unmistakable signature of Richard Brennan. She texted the nanny she was heading down in 5 minutes. Leah and Mrs. Chen waited in the lobby playroom, unaware of the storm about to strike. The parking garage was dimly lit, the shadows pooling between concrete pillars. Cecilia walked briskly toward her car, heels clicking against the cement. Then masked men appeared. The first grabbed her arm, yanking her backward. Her briefcase flew, papers scattering like confetti in a storm. The second shoved her against a concrete pillar. Pain exploded through her body. Voices muffled but commanding demanded the location of backup files. Her vision blurred. She tried to fight, to remember her training, but her body failed her. Someone was coming. The attackers hissed and fled, leaving Cecilia collapsed, barely conscious. 15 minutes passed. Mrs. Chen, trembling, tried to call an ambulance. Laya, heart-pounding, pulled free and sprinted for Daniel. She found him, gripping his gray uniform tightly, tears streaming down her small face. "Mr. Daniel." "My mom, she's down there, she won't wake up." Daniel dropped to one knee, calm now, the ice-cold focus sharpening in his eyes. "Take me to her," he said quietly. Laya grabbed his hand, leading him through the elevator doors into the chaos of sub-level 2. Daniel's mind clicked into combat medicine mode, assessing trauma, calculating survival odds, anticipating critical steps. The security guard assured him the ambulance was on the way. 6 minutes might be too long, Daniel thought, as his hands moved with practiced efficiency. He approached Cecilia, checking her airway, her pupils splinting her fractured arm, positioning her to protect her from further harm, covering her with his jacket to prevent shock. Each movement was precise, practiced, deliberate, military efficiency applied to a civilian emergency. He revealed his bag of medical supplies, hidden beneath his janitor uniform, sterile gauze, trauma kits, hemostatic agents, all ready. Laya knelt beside her mother, whispering encouragement. The wail of sirens in the distance became their beacon. Paramedics arrived, assessing Daniel's work with astonishment. "Who did the first response?" one asked. "I did," Daniel replied, calm, collected, eyes reflecting neither pride nor fear. His battlefield-trained hands had stabilized a civilian, a life on the edge, in minutes that could have meant death. Cecilia Warren woke in the sterile hum of a hospital room, machines beeping steadily, a rhythm she clung to like a lifeline. Pain radiated through her body, her head throbbing, ribs aching, her left arm immobilized in a cast. She blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights, disoriented, the memory of the garage assault heavy in her mind. Then, a small voice cut through the haze. "Mom!" Her eyes found Laya, seated beside the bed, holding her mother's hand with a mix of fear and relief. Mrs. Chen hovered behind, tense but controlled. Cecilia tried to speak, her throat raw. How? Laya's wide eyes shone. "Mr. Daniel, he saved you. He came down with all these things and knew exactly what to do. The ambulance people said I would have been alone if he hadn't been there." Cecilia's mind reeled. Daniel, the janitor, had done what trained paramedics and perhaps even seasoned trauma surgeons would struggle to accomplish in those frantic minutes. Her pulse raced, not from fear but from the shock of discovery. She struggled to sit upright, wincing as pain shot through her ribs and arm. Her hands trembled over the hospital sheets, her fingers brushing Laya's. Mrs. Chen's voice quivered. "It's true. He stabilized you perfectly. I've never seen someone work like that, not outside of an emergency room in a war zone." The door opened, and a police detective stepped in, formal, serious, and clearly exhausted. Detective Morris, a man in his 40s with a sharp, pragmatic presence, surveyed the room. "Miss Warren, I need to ask you some questions. About your attackers." Cecilia recalled fragmented details, the masks, the aggression, the chilling familiarity in one voice. "2 men. One voice I think I recognized. Marcus Holloway. Works in finance. Richard Brennan's assistant," Morris wrote rapidly, his pen scratching over the notepad. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure," Cecilia replied. "They were after files. Backup files. I've been investigating embezzlement. Brennan, my CFO, he's the culprit." The words hung in the room. Even Mrs. Chen stiffened. The idea that someone so close, trusted, would orchestrate violence was almost too much to bear. The investigation unfolded with meticulous precision. Over 3 days, the police traced connections, verified financial anomalies, and located the attackers attempting to flee the city. Holloway and Chen confessed under pressure. Their testimonies revealed a web of deceit, systematic embezzlement spanning 2 years, shell companies, offshore accounts, and, horrifically, the order to intimidate. And perhaps harm Cecilia. Meanwhile, Daniel had returned to his janitorial duties as if nothing had happened, silent and unassuming. When police sought his statement, he was polite but elusive. "I have first aid training from the military. I heard the child calling for help. I stabilized the victim until paramedics arrived." "That's all," Cecilia's mind raced. A janitor who carried military-grade trauma kits. who performed battlefield-level interventions in a city parking garage, who saved her life and vanished without seeking recognition. She demanded answers. Her security team dug into Daniel's past, uncovering fragments of a life that seemed impossible. Captain Daniel Carter, U.S. Army Medical Corps, decorated trauma surgeon, 3 tours in combat zones, 27 confirmed saves under fire, honorable discharge 8 years ago. And then, nothing. He disappeared from the world he once dominated, leaving colleagues, accolades, even his own family's expectations behind. The investigation revealed a haunting truth. 8 years prior, Daniel had been stationed in Kandahar, managing a makeshift hospital that treated coalition forces and civilians alike. His wife, Emily Carter, a nurse and partner in every sense, had worked alongside him. Together, they were inseparable, dedicated to saving lives amidst chaos. Then the convoy, the one carrying crucial medical supplies, was hit by an IED. Emily had volunteered for it. Daniel could not go. He was scheduled for surgery. The explosion killed 12 people instantly. Emily was among them. Daniel worked through 18 hours of desperate surgeries to save survivors. 11 lives were pulled back from death's door. Emily was gone. That day broke him. It fractured something irreparable. He received an honorable discharge, vanished, and refused to return to medicine. The world lost Daniel Carter, trauma surgeon and hero, and only his silence remained. Cecilia read the report, tears streaming, the weight of what she now understood pressing into her chest. He chose to spend 3 years mopping floors because he couldn't forgive himself for surviving when his wife didn't, she whispered aloud. And yet, he saved me. They found him finally in a rundown community center teaching homeless teenagers first aid. His demeanor was calm, measured, patient. He moved among the kids, correcting technique gently, demonstrating with quiet authority. When Cecilia approached, still fragile from her injuries, the teenagers scattered. Daniel's eyes met hers, guarded but acknowledging. "You should still be in the hospital," he said. "You saved my life. Why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" she asked, voice cracking. "Because it doesn't matter." "I'm not that person anymore," Daniel replied, packing his supplies, preparing to disappear again. But Cecilia persisted. Laia, she explained, adored him. She trusted him completely. She needed to understand. Daniel's jaw tightened. "She shouldn't have seen what she did," he murmured. "She shouldn't have seen me save her mother." "Not like that." Cecilia stepped closer, gentle, firm. "You weren't brave for yourself. You were brave for her, for all of us. And for the first time, maybe, you can be brave for yourself, too." Daniel's eyes fell, haunted by the memory of Emily, of failure, of survival, when his love did not. "I couldn't save her," he whispered. "Not the one person who mattered most." "And yet you save others now," Cecilia said softly. "You teach, you heal, you care. Emily would have wanted this. She would want you to keep helping." For the first time in 8 years, Daniel considered moving forward. Not forgetting, not replacing, but honoring the past by embracing purpose again. He looked at Cecilia, then at Laia, who clutched his hand with unshakable trust. The spark that had lain dormant ignited. The morning air was crisp, the city still yawning awake as Cecilia Warren arrived at Warren Tech. Her arm was in a sling, bruises fading, but her posture remained resolute. Today wasn't about recovery. Today was about justice. Today was about reclaiming everything Richard Brennan had tried to steal and protecting the legacy her father had built. She entered the sleek lobby, her presence commanding despite her injuries. Employees whispered, many staring, stunned by her resilience. Daniel Carter had arrived early as well, not in his janitor's uniform, but in a simple, dark suit that spoke of professionalism without arrogance. He moved with a quiet efficiency, observing without being observed. No one recognized him. Not the cleaners, not the executives, not even the security team. He was invisible again, if only by design. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp. Cecilia's laptop was open, spreadsheets projected onto the large glass wall behind her. She had meticulously prepared every piece of evidence, bank records, emails, authorization slips, all pointing to systematic embezzlement. $70 million had been siphoned through shell companies and offshore accounts. Every dollar traced back to the CFO she had once trusted, At 8:58 a.m., Richard Brennan walked in. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, his polished confidence masking the ruthlessness beneath. He smiled, extending a hand. "Cecilia, thank God you're all right." She didn't shake it. "Not today." "Sit down, Richard," she said evenly, every word measured. He raised an eyebrow, an imperceptible flicker of unease crossing his face. Something about her composure unsettled him. The board members, 8 in total, aged between 45 and 70, settled in, eyes darting between the CEO and her CFO. The tension was tangible, a storm ready to break. Cecilia took a deep breath. "Thank you all for coming. I need to discuss something important." She began to walk through the projected spreadsheet, each figure precise, each anomaly highlighted. Unauthorized transactions, shell accounts, wire transfers, manipulated audits. The room murmured, incredulous. Elizabeth Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, leaned forward. "How is this possible?" Cecilia's eyes locked on the board. The audits were doctored. The Oversight Committee received falsified reports. It was an inside job, carefully orchestrated over 2 years. By whom? Our CFO, Richard Brennan. Shock rippled through the room. Gasps, whispered comments, and stunned silence. Brennan's face turned crimson. "This is outrageous. You suffered a serious head injury. Clearly you're not thinking." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly," Cecilia snapped, her voice sharp, commanding. "I have documentation, bank records, emails, authorizations with your signature. And the FBI has been investigating you for a week." The tension escalated. Board members exchanged glances. Richard Brennan's mask of confidence began to crack. He opened his mouth, trying to defend himself, but Cecilia cut through each excuse with evidence. The room felt smaller, charged with anticipation. Brennan suddenly lunged forward, moving aggressively toward her, his hand clenched. The board gasped, some frozen in shock, others reaching for phones, unsure what would happen next. But Daniel Carter, silently positioned outside the boardroom glass, had already seen it. His years of combat instincts kicked in. In one fluid motion he entered the room, positioning himself between Brennan and Cecilia, an invisible shield materializing. "Step back," Daniel said quietly, his tone calm but lethal. Brennan froze, assessing this man who now blocked his path. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, fury and disbelief battling in his eyes. "Someone who knows exactly what you're capable of. And someone who won't let you hurt her again," Daniel replied evenly. The board members whispered among themselves, incredulous. One of them, Elizabeth Morrison, finally found her voice. "Security!" she shouted. Before anyone could react further, the unmistakable presence of FBI agents filled the doorway. Badges flashed, their demeanor commanding. "Richard Brennan, you are under arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy, money laundering, and attempted murder," the lead agent declared. Brennan's face twisted in rage, disbelief, and impotent fury. "You'll never survive this company without me." "You're weak! You're not half the CEO your father was." Daniel's eyes were steel, calm, unwavering. "She survived you trying to kill her. That makes her stronger than you'll ever be." As Brennan was handcuffed, the room exhaled collectively. The air, thick with tension, shifted. Board members murmured, processing the unprecedented scene. Cecilia sank into her chair, trembling, exhausted, yet alive. Daniel stepped back, observing quietly. This was not recognition he sought. He had no need for accolades. He had been the silent guardian, the invisible hand protecting those who could not protect themselves. Today, his intervention ensured justice prevailed, but it was not for him. It was for Cecilia, for Laya, for the principles he had once sworn to uphold in a war zone far from this city. Cecilia turned to him, voice soft, gratitude unmasked by tears. "Thank you." He nodded, humility etched into every line of his face. "You didn't need me. You had control." "I needed to know someone was there," she said, her voice steady despite the storm that had just passed. "Someone I could trust completely," her eyes met his, "and that someone was you." The revelation of Daniel's true identity rippled through the room. "Who is this man?" a board member whispered. The janitor, turned savior, stood resolute, ready to reclaim his own narrative. For 3 years, he had been invisible. Today, he was seen. The aftermath was swift. Brennan's arrest was the first domino in a series of sweeping changes at Warren Tech. The finance department underwent a complete audit. Interim leadership stabilized operations. Cecilia, though battered and weary, began the arduous process of rebuilding her company. Her trust restored in the few who had proven their loyalty. Daniel resumed his duties, but the company's perception of him had irrevocably changed. No longer invisible, he was now acknowledged not only as a hero but as a man of unparalleled skill and integrity. Employees who had ignored him now stopped, nodded, and some even expressed gratitude. And through it all, Laya remained his most ardent supporter, her admiration unshaken, her faith in him unwavering. Yet Daniel remained unchanged in the ways that mattered. His purpose was not recognition but service. The boardroom confrontation had confirmed one truth: courage, when wielded selflessly, could alter the course of lives. And Daniel Carter had chosen to wield his in the most profound way imaginable. The weeks following Richard Brennan's arrest were a blur of meetings, audits, and media attention. Warren Tech had survived the storm, but its CEO, Cecilia Warren, felt the weight of nearly losing everything. Her father's vision had nearly been destroyed, and now it was her responsibility to restore not only the company's reputation, but the trust of the people who relied on it. Daniel Carter remained a constant presence, though discreet. No longer just a janitor or silent protector, he began helping Cecilia in ways that were less visible, but infinitely valuable. He guided her through complex negotiations, analyzed financial irregularities that still lingered, and most importantly, reminded her to breathe when the pressure became unbearable. One morning, as autumn leaves swirled outside the office windows, Cecilia turned to him. "We did it," she said softly, almost disbelieving. "The company, the employees, the families depending on us. They're safe now." Daniel smiled faintly, humility masking the pride that burned quietly within him. "You did it. I just made sure no one got in your way." Her eyes softened. "You've done more than that, Daniel. You've saved me more than once. I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head, looking out the window, contemplative. "There's a lot of people who need help, and not all of them have someone to protect them. You're one of the lucky ones. I'm just doing what I can." Cecilia glanced at him, realizing for the first time the depth of his selflessness. He had sacrificed his anonymity, his comfort, even his own safety to ensure her survival. And yet he didn't seek fame, fortune, or acknowledgement. There was a quiet strength about him, the kind of strength that anchored storms. Amid the corporate chaos, Cecilia conceived a new initiative inspired by Laya, the young girl whose medical needs had sparked the first chain of events. She envisioned a community health center for families in need, a place where children could get proper medical care and support without fear of cost or bureaucracy. It was ambitious, and some board members raised doubts, but Cecilia's resolve was unshakable. "I want this to happen," she told Daniel one evening as they walked through the nearly empty office floor. "For Laya, for her family, for every child who doesn't have a safety net." Daniel nodded. "Then we make it happen, step by step." The project began with a small, abandoned clinic on the outskirts of the city. Together, they cleared out debris, repainted walls, installed new equipment, and enlisted volunteers. Daniel's organizational skills and hands-on approach turned what seemed impossible into reality. He coordinated with doctors, sourced medical supplies, and even handled security. Meanwhile, Cecilia leveraged Warren Tech's resources, funding, and connections to bring legitimacy to the endeavor. During those long days, the bond between them deepened. It wasn't romantic, at least not overtly, but it was undeniably intimate. They shared quiet moments, laughs, frustrations, and victories. Daniel, who had once been invisible, found himself speaking freely, teaching Cecilia to navigate bureaucracy and people, while she taught him the art of trust and hope. One afternoon, as the first patients arrived at the newly restored clinic, Daniel observed quietly from the corner. Children in bright clothes clutched stuffed animals, mothers whispered thanks, and nurses moved efficiently, offering care and comfort. The clinic was alive with hope, and for Daniel, It was the most rewarding mission of all. Cecilia approached him, a soft smile on her face. "Look at this. You made this happen." "We made this happen," Daniel shook his head. "No, you made it happen. I'm just along for the ride." Her hand brushed his briefly, a small, unspoken acknowledgement of the connection between them. "You've done more than you realize," she said. That evening, as the city lights flickered outside the clinic windows, Daniel and Cecilia sat together on the roof, surveying the cityscape. The air was crisp, the sounds of traffic muted beneath them. There was a calm after the storm, a quiet sense of accomplishment that neither could have achieved alone. "You ever think about the future?" Cecilia asked, her voice soft, contemplative. Daniel leaned back, eyes tracing the stars barely visible through the city lights. "I don't usually plan too far ahead," he said. "I take things one step at a time, but I think I can see a future here, with people worth protecting, with purpose," she nodded, understanding more than words could express. "Sometimes it takes almost losing everything to see what matters," she whispered. Daniel turned to her, his gaze unwavering. "Then let's not lose it again." For the first time, Daniel allowed himself a quiet hope, a belief that life could offer not just survival, but meaning. And Cecilia, inspired by his quiet courage, began to understand that strength was not just in fighting battles or winning boardroom wars, but in caring for those who could not care for themselves. As weeks turned into months, the clinic flourished. Families came not just for treatment, but for guidance, support, and community. News outlets covered the story of the anonymous man who had saved a CEO and helped build a community center, a tale of courage, humility, and selflessness. But Daniel never sought recognition. The work was enough. One day, Leia ran into the clinic laughing, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. "For you," she shouted, handing them to Daniel. "You saved my life, and now everyone else's too." Daniel knelt, accepting the flowers with a rare smile. "Thank you, Leia, but you all are the reason we do this." Cecilia watched from the doorway, her heart swelling. She realized that life's greatest victories weren't always measured in money or power. They were measured in lives touched, hope restored, and the courage to keep going despite the odds. And in the quiet moments, when the city hummed softly beneath them, Daniel and Cecilia shared a silent understanding. They had survived darkness, fought injustice, and now, together, they were building light. Spring had fully arrived, and the city seemed to breathe in unison with the lives Daniel, Cecilia, and Leia had touched. The Daniel Carter Community Health Center was thriving, its walls alive with laughter, chatter, and quiet gratitude. Patients from every corner of the city arrived for care they could not have dreamed of receiving before, and volunteers moved with purpose, inspired by the example set by Daniel and Cecilia. Daniel had finally reclaimed the identity he had tried to bury, the doctor, the healer, the man who could make a difference. But he carried it lightly, with humility and dedication, avoiding the spotlight while ensuring every patient felt seen, heard, and valued. Children like Leia's friends were learning basic first aid in the community rooms, practicing bandaging and CPR under his watchful eye. Adults found counseling services, nutrition guidance, and mental health support, all structured to uplift the whole person, not just treat symptoms. One morning, as Daniel walked through the clinic, he paused in the children's area where Leia was playing with a group of kids. She looked up and waved. "Dr. Daniel, come see what I built." He approached, curious, and saw a small cardboard city Leia had constructed. Tiny hospitals, homes, playgrounds, and figures holding hands. "Is this the world you want to see?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Yeah," she said enthusiastically. "Everyone helps each other, and no one is ever alone." "Just like you and Mom," Daniel's chest tightened. This 6-year-old had witnessed courage, compassion, and resilience, and internalized it in a way that felt almost sacred. It was proof that their struggles had rippled beyond themselves, inspiring hope and action. Meanwhile, Cecilia had emerged stronger than ever. Her company had stabilized, her employees more loyal than ever, and she had become a vocal advocate for corporate social responsibility. She visited the clinic regularly, sometimes bringing lunch for the staff, sometimes simply sitting in the courtyard with Daniel and Leia. enjoying quiet moments away from the pressures of her office. One afternoon, Cecilia and Daniel sat together in the courtyard after a long morning of consultations. The air smelled of flowers and fresh-cut grass, and the sunlight highlighted the faint scars and bruises that remained from the night of the attack. There was a comfortable silence between them, the kind that comes from shared history and mutual respect. "I never realized how much fear and grief can shape a person," Cecilia said softly, staring at the distant skyline. "I thought I knew what courage was. Until I saw yours," Daniel shook his head. "I'm no hero, I just couldn't let the past dictate who I was today." "Laya, you!" All of this reminded me that life is bigger than my guilt. Cecilia's hand found his, fingers brushing gently. "You've given people more than just medical care. You've given them hope. You've given me hope." Their eyes met, and for the first time, words weren't necessary. There was understanding, acceptance, and the beginning of something deeper than friendship. A connection forged in crisis and tempered in compassion. Weeks later, the anniversary of the clinic's opening arrived. The celebration was simple but heartfelt. Families came to honor the place that had changed their lives. Children ran in the courtyard with balloons, and the staff gathered to acknowledge the hard work and dedication that had brought it all to life. Laya led the festivities, proudly showing off her drawings, each depicting Daniel in heroic stances, bandaging a patient, comforting a crying child, smiling gently as people leaned on him for guidance. When the time came for a speech, Daniel stepped onto a small stage, the sun casting warm light over the crowd. He cleared his throat, nerves and humility intertwining. "A year ago, I was a man who had given up," he began. "I thought I had failed in the worst way possible. But life has a way of offering second chances, not because we deserve them, but because sometimes the world needs us more than we know. This center isn't about me. It's about every person here who needed care, attention, and someone to believe in them. And it's about showing that no one is invisible. Every life matters. Every act of kindness echoes farther than we imagine." The crowd erupted in applause, but Daniel's gaze found Cecilia and Laya in the front row. Their smiles anchored him, reminding him that he had found a family, a purpose, and a second chance to live fully. After the ceremony, Laya tugged at his sleeve. "I have something for you," she whispered, handing him a folded piece of paper. He opened it to find a crayon drawing of the clinic, alive with stick figures holding hands, children laughing, and a small figure with angel wings watching over them, Emily. In the corner, another figure knelt beside her, hands ready to heal and comfort. Daniel's eyes blurred as he realized that Laya had captured the essence of everything he had worked for, the continuity of care, the love that guided his hands, and the memory of the woman who had inspired him to become a doctor in the first place. Cecilia approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've done what Emily would have wanted," she said. "You didn't just save lives, you've built a legacy." Daniel exhaled, a mix of relief, pride, and gratitude washing over him. Maybe it's finally time to stop running from the past and start living in the present," Cecilia smiled. "You've been living it all along, Daniel. You just needed to see it reflected back at you." Months turned into years. The Daniel Carter Community Health Center became a model for compassionate, accessible healthcare. Families from all over the city came for services. Teenagers who had once wandered the streets were now trained in first aid, ready to help the next person in need. Veterans found solace in counseling programs, and children like Leia learned that courage and kindness were more powerful than fear. Daniel, once invisible, was now a pillar of his community. Yet he remained humble, walking the halls quietly, offering guidance, encouragement, and healing wherever needed. Cecilia continued leading Warren Tech, now intertwining corporate success with social responsibility, ensuring the company she inherited truly served the greater good. And Laya? She thrived in a world where she had seen courage firsthand. She knew the value of standing up, of helping, of trusting, and she carried it with her in everything she did. One spring evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, the three of them sat in the courtyard watching children play. Daniel's hand found Cecilia's, and Laya rested her head on her mother's shoulder. They didn't need words. They had survived, they had healed, and they had built something lasting, something that mattered. The world could still be cruel, unpredictable, and unfair. But within the walls of the clinic, and within the bond of their chosen family, there was hope, love, and courage. And that was enough. For Daniel Carter, it was the redemption he had long sought. For Cecilia Warren, it was the assurance that she was not alone. And for Laya Warren, it was the understanding that even the smallest voice could summon the greatest heroes. As the city lights flickered on and the clinic's doors closed for the night, a sense of quiet triumph settled over them. A story that had begun in fear and desperation had transformed into one of resilience, love, and lasting legacy. They had faced darkness and emerged not just intact, but radiant with purpose, and in the end, Daniel knew as he looked at Cecilia and Laya, that sometimes the greatest heroism isn't about the battles we fight alone. It's about the lives we touch, the hope we inspire, and the courage we give to others to keep moving forward.